Jessica Kringle. Of course, most of you know me as Mrs. Claus, and we are counting down the days of December until Christmas with a different recipe of sweets and treats each day. And so we are going to go ahead and go to our Advent calendar and see what we've got for today. I have a pretty good idea because I know what celebration is tomorrow, but let's double check. It is the 12th. We are finishing our first row of our Advent calendar, which means that we are halfway to Christmas Eve. How exciting! All right, so let's go ahead and open this. And yes, we are baking a Saint Lucia's Crown. Now, this is pretty involved, so you're going to need to roll up your sleeves, and we're doing some yeasty bread, so it's going to take a little while, and that's why we're starting so early in the morning. But let me go ahead and wash my hands, and I will get all of the ingredients out. And if you would like one of these little recipe cards to follow along, you can get a printable one at www.crafterscountdown.com so that you can follow along with me on these recipes. All right, let me go wash my hands. Ready, my hands are clean, and we have gotten out our ingredients. And I pre-measured of all of the flour that it calls for. I measured aside 2.5 cups of the total flour to put into here. And to this, we're going to add our salt, our sugar, and our yeast. Now, I know that the recipe calls for 2 packets. I do enough baking around here that I don't buy those little packets. I buy it in bulk. And so 2 1/4 teaspoons equals 1 of those packets. So we are actually using 4.5 teaspoons since it calls for 2 of those packets. This is a quick rise yeast that I get from a flour mill. It's very wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and mix this together. So we need to head over to the stove to mix our wet ingredients because we want them warm so that it will take good care of our yeast in here. So give me just a second. We're going to mix our liquids into a pan and heat them to 120 degrees. Now, we don't want it to boil. It's okay if the butter doesn't melt at 120 degrees, but you don't want it any hotter because it could kill the yeast, but you want it warm enough that it makes it start to grow and dissolve and develop. So we're going to go ahead and add our buttermilk and our water, and I like to swish the water in the cup that the buttermilk was in just to make sure that it rinses it out. And I'll go ahead and turn this on, and we'll add our butter. Oops, stop. And then the instructions say that you can either add yellow food coloring to make it more brilliant or a pinch of saffron. Now, I understand that saffron is quite expensive and not overly easy to find, and it comes in smaller quantities even than your regular spices. But I'm going to go ahead, for more authenticity, give a pinch of this saffron, crumble it up because it's kind of woody here, and that should both darken our mix, and it adds just a little bit of flavor and aroma to it as well. Okay. Get our thermometer in here. Okay, we're at 120 degrees, so I'm going to go ahead and go back over to where we were mixing everything else so that we can add this to the flour mix that we made. We've got this at 120 degrees, and look how beautifully yellow that is. Can you see that? It's so pretty. That saffron made it just beautiful. And it's got such an interesting smell. It's not a very popular thing, so we don't get to use it that often. I'm going to pour that into here. I have my trusty rubber spatula, of course. Right, and then you'll see that I put a bread blender on here instead of the wire whiskey kind. We also need to add 2 eggs. You know the drill with me and my eggs, right? And we'll add this. You use electric beaters, that's fine, or you can use brawn, that works as well. Kind of feel spoiled having this wonderful tool here, huh? All right, so we're going to stir this just until the ingredients are moistened on a very low speed, and then we're going to raise it to a high speed and let it beat for 3 minutes. All right, that's been 3 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and remove this. Clean up this beater a little bit with my trusty rubber spatula, right? Me and my rubber spatulas. There's some saffron stuck on there. Next, we're going to fold in by hand our candied lemon peel. In there. And our candied citron. And our almonds. So I did use the food processor this time and not the hand chopper that I use. And we're going to go ahead and fold this in. And then we're going to sprinkle in just enough flour so that this creates a soft dough, because it is still very liquidy and we need it to be doughy so we can knead it. So I'm going to go ahead and fold in a little bit of flour. Until this starts to thicken up a little bit. You can guess that since it calls for 6.5 cups of flour total for the recipe, some of that may be sprinkling for the floured surface, but you can guess that you're going to add quite a bit of flour into here to create that soft dough. Keep folding this in. Trying to thicken up a little bit. Get some more flour. So this was 2 cups so far that I'm adding to see if it takes care of making our dough the way we want it, so that it's kneadable and formable. It's starting to get a little bit less sticky here. Went ahead and switched to a metal spoon since that poor little rubber one was bending too much, because this has gotten nice and hard. Still a little bit sticky for kneading and rolling, so I got some more of the flour that it calls for also. So we'll add a little bit of that. Seems to be forming in a way that we're going to go ahead and be able to knead it. So let me get out my pastry mat. So you want to turn it out onto a lightly floured surface. A little bit of flour down here. Roll up your sleeves. And turn this out onto here. It's wonderful. Still pretty sticky. You want to make sure that you have a little bit of flour for your hands as well. Okay. I'm going to fold this over a couple of times. It's still pretty sticky, so I'm going to keep adding flour. Fold this over. You need to knead this for 5 to 8 minutes, and then we also need to cover it and let it rest for 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I will let you stop watching, and hopefully you're working along and you can do that too. If it feels a little bit sticky, don't be afraid to add a little bit more flour. Again, it called for 6 cups and we've only used about 5 at this point, so we do have more flour we can add if we need to. When you knead, you want to press with the palm of your hand forward, and then you fold it in half, give it a half turn, and press again, and you fold and press. Turn, fold, press. And yes, the little citron candies are popping out. You just stick them back in and start over again. We have done this for 5.5 minutes, and so now I'm going to cover and let it rest for 10, and I'm going to go ahead and use a piece of plastic cling to do that, just because we want to make sure that it doesn't dry out while it's resting. You could also use a little towel that you've gotten just slightly moist. All right, I'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, it's been 10 minutes, and so we will uncover our well-rested dough. I didn't get to be well-rested in that 10 minutes. I was washing dishes and cleaning up. All right, we're going to divide this into thirds in our mind. So we're going to do eyeball, of course, and cut off 1/3 of this. So we'd say right about there. And it's best to, when you're dividing a bread or yeasted dough, that you try to cut it instead of pulling it, because pulling it will, it's kneading it some more, and it will create breaking up the gluten a little bit more. All right. Maybe just a skosh more of this. But you also don't want to use something sharp like a knife for your cutting mat, so you do want to be careful. All right, and then we're going to wrap this up and set it aside for a bit while we finish dealing with this one. Now this we're going to divide into thirds. We were on the Great British Baking Show or something, we'd make sure that we weighed each of these so that we know that they're perfectly equal, huh? All right, and then we're going to roll these into 25-inch snakes, or rolls. Set these aside a little bit. Now this mat is approximately 24 inches wide, so I know that I need it just a skosh longer than my rolling mat. Okay, and we're going to do this to all 3 of these. So give me just a few minutes. And we need to grease our baking sheet. We're going to need 2 baking sheets for this. So, got one, and then we'll do the other one when we need it. And now that we have this in 3 pieces, we're going to braid this. So we put one over the center, and then the farthest one over the center, and each time that one becomes the center, and then this one over the center, and it's a loose braid, not a tight braid that we're looking for here. Kind of like doing the little girl elf's hair, huh? And then we're going to make this into a circle and pinch the ends so that they're connected. Then very carefully set this onto our baking sheet. And then we need to pinch this a little bit more. And then we need to cover this and let it set in a warm area for about an hour until it doubles in size. So you want to kind of look at what size it is now so you know what double is going to look like. And since it's nice and cold, Santa has built me a fire so that I can stay warm, and so this will be lovely sitting by the fire. And now we're going to do the same with this that we did with the other one, but because it's a lesser amount, because it was only a third of what we had before, then this should make a smaller crown, and this is going to be the one that we set on top of the other one when we build our crown, when it's all cooked. Those feel about the same. All right, let me roll these. I'm going to break them, put them in a circle also on a greased cookie sheet, just like the other before, and then set it with the other one to rise until it doubles in size, which takes, again, approximately an hour, and you want to cover it and put it in a warm place. You want to cover it with either a plastic wrap or with a damp towel. Now, these we're going to roll to 16 inches, not 25 inches. So these are going to be a little bit shorter also, so that your crown is smaller. And if you don't have a cutting mat with little measurements on it, like I do, then you certainly can use a yardstick or a ruler or any way that you use to measure, or you can eyeball. That's always a great trick too. I'm going to go ahead and roll these out, break them, and set them to rise. I'll be back with you when they're done. Our bread has definitely proved. It's doubled in size. It's been about an hour. And I preheated the oven to 350 degrees so that we can bake these. And we're going to bake the small one at 350 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. And then we're going to bake the larger one for 25 to 30 minutes. So it'll take just a little bit longer in the oven. So let me get these placed in the oven, and we will be back in about half an hour. Now we need to get out a cooling rack so that these can cool on a cooling rack so that the bottoms don't continue to cook while they're sitting on a hot tray. We need 2 cooling racks, and it's a good idea to switch them. You know, you're cooking 2 things at the same time, and so one's going to be on the top and one's going to be on the bottom, and it's a great idea to switch them halfway through so that they brown evenly. And then before this cools, because we put candles in Saint Lucia's crown, we're going to go ahead and poke 6 holes into our bread. You don't want to wait till it's completely cool, because it will more crack and break the bread. When it's still warm, it makes these lovely little holes, and those taper candles will fit in there perfectly. Now we need to let these cool, and then we can glaze and assemble for Saint Lucia's celebration tomorrow. This smells so delicious. I wanted to start cutting into it and eating it now, but I have to wait for the celebration and everyone else to share. So I'll be back with you when these cool off. We're back, and our Saint Lucia's crowns are all cool, and it smells so wonderful in here. It is really, really hard to wait until tomorrow to cut into these, especially since I love warm bread with butter on it, but we want these to cool completely. So here's our large round, and we're going to place this on a decorative tray, and then we take the small one that we poked the holes in and place it on top so that it looks like a crown. Now, in a lot of the cultures, the children will make head wreath crowns out of flowers and greens and stuff, and then we'll put candles in it on their heads. I think we probably don't light them anymore because it's dangerous, but back when they first started celebrating this, they would light those candles and the children would dance. It was really fun. All right, the next thing we need to do is make a glaze to drizzle over this, and then we're going to do some decorating. I've gotten out the 2 cups of confectioner's sugar, and then we add 2 to 3 tablespoons of water, just enough to make it like a glaze. So I'm going to start with 2, and then we'll mix this. See how thick it gets. Some of it may depend on the humidity of where you live, whether or not it is wet or dry. I know that Santa builds me a fire so that I stay nice and warm, but that dries the air out pretty much here, so we'll probably need more. So yes, we're still very glumpy in here. Add another one. And if you need to add more than 3, don't worry about that. You just make it so that it drizzleable. Is that a word? We're going to use that from now on, okay? We'll contact Webster and let them know that Mrs. Claus made up the word drizzleable. You don't want it so liquidy that it doesn't stick to the bread when you do drizzle it. So you don't want it runny, you just want it pourable. So maybe, drizzle is the correct word, but not too runny. Now, my bowl has a spout on it, which is really amazing. I probably could have done this in one of the small glass pitchers as well if I needed to make sure I could pour it. If you don't have anything like either one of those, you could certainly just use your knife or a spoon to go ahead and drizzle that on. So, and I think in order to keep it thin, I'm going to go ahead and do that to start. So we're going to just drizzle this across here in a decorative way, so back and forth. I'm going to go around to make sure it gets on the bottom one as well. If it would bother you that some of the glaze and icing gets on your decorative plate, then it's a good idea to go ahead and do this before you put it on the decorative plate. For me, I think it just sort of adds some character to the plate, so I am okay with this. And the elves like to sort of stick their fingers there and clean it up anyway when the bread's all gone. I'm going to take some pecan halves and some red and green candied cherries, they're so beautiful, and place these just around as a decoration into the glaze. Hi, sweetie.
Hey, Mama, have you seen my hammer? I seem to have misplaced it.
Oh, you didn't misplace it. I wasn't sure if I was going to need it for the toffees the other day, and I forgot to give it back. It's right here. I didn't need it.
Is this your Saint Lucia's crown?
It is.
Boy, did it come out good.
Oh, thank you.
I can't wait till breakfast in the morning.
Oh, I know. The festivities are going to start at dawn. I can't wait either. Doesn't it smell wonderful?
Oh, it smells so good. Oh, but I better get back to the workshop. I still got work I have to do.
Okay, well, don't work too late because remember the festivities start at dawn and you need to get plenty of rest.
Okay, Mama. I'll see you in the morning.
All right, bye-bye, Papa. I'm just worried about saffron. She's just wild about me. I'm just wild. You know, what's interesting is that I have a friend who doesn't celebrate Christmas. He celebrates Hanukkah. And when I told him about this year's countdown, he said, "Ooh, are you going to make a Saint Lucia's crown?" So this is across cultural borders and across the celebrations of the different people who celebrate this time of year. A lot of people love this little crown dessert. So I can't wait to make sure I get some to him so he can try what we've made here. Well, I think that looks wonderful. I just need to get the candles in place and then we will have this ready for tomorrow's celebration. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you'll come back tomorrow and see what we are making as we continue with our Christmas countdown. I hope to see you then. Bye-bye.